This is the tutorial for the Mayfield jacket. We're going to start by popping in the bust tarts. So you can see here I've got my pattern and I've marked the bust point for the size that I'm making with a pin. I've pinned it all the way through and I've marked the wider end by the side seam with some little tiny snips. You can always use chalk to mark it if you prefer. I'm going to match up those notches on the side seam and fold my piece so that that pin is right on the edge. So just get those notches to line up, pop a pin in it, and basically it tapers off towards that pin. There we go, so you can see a little wedge shape. I'm going to stitch from the side seam to the point and taper it off when I reach that pin at the end. There we go, back tack, and I'm tapering off as I get towards that pin at the bust point. I don't back tack over my bust point so that I don't get any wrinkles. There we go, that's what it should look like. I'm going to press it over a tailor's ham, which is a curved pressing aid, so that it makes a nice bust shape, and press that down. Okay, so side and shoulder seams. There we go, there's my two fronts. You can see I've pressed those darts downwards towards the hem. I'm going to overlock the side seams on there and the shoulders, and I'm going to do the same on my back panel. I'm going to overlock the side seams and across the shoulders. Here we go, nicely neatened. Now I'm going to pin my fronts to my back at the shoulder and the side. Side seam should match and be the same length. And the shoulder, the back shoulder is a little longer than the front, so if you're worried about it puckering when you sew, you can always put one thread stitch along 1 centimetre from the edge and just pull it up ever so slightly, so that will help ease the back into the front. It's not a huge amount of ease, but if you're unsure. And I'm going to stitch my centimetre seam allowance now along my shoulder seam and along my side seam. There we go, over the dart. That's one side done. I'm going to press these seams open now. You can see that's eased in nicely there with no puckering. I'm going to press that open and the side seam. There you go, that's one side done. Just repeat for the other side. Next we're going to do the sleeve seams. This is one of my sleeves. I'll show you that I've got little snips again for my notches. Make sure you've marked these notches. If you're not happy to put little snips in, you can use chalk or safety pin. I'm going to overlock the sleeve seams there. I've overlocked the sides and the hem. And now I'm going to pop these together. You'll see it's shaped at the end of the sleeve. So match that up. You're going to need to just pivot that as you stitch up the sleeve seam. That's so that when it folds back underneath, it fits snugly to the sleeve. Okay, I'm doing the centimetre seam allowance again. All seam allowances are a centimetre unless otherwise stated. That was a little pivot there at the cuff. There we go. I'm going to press that open again. Always useful to have a sleeve board for doing that. There we go, beautiful. Okay, let's put these sleeves in. So there's my jacket, inside out. There's my sleeve right side out. I'm just going to check again. There you go. Double notch denotes the back of the sleeve, single notch the front. I'm going to match this sleeve seam and the side seam together and put a pin in there. match those on top of each other, pop a pin in. Now if you're new to setting in sleeves or you're unsure, you can always put a gather thread a centimetre from the raw edge of the sleeve head, so that you can just pull it up ever so slightly to help you to ease the fabric into the armhole. There's not a huge amount of ease in this pattern, but if you're again a bit unsure or a newbie, that might help you. So I'm matching these notches up. I've got the one single notch at the top of the sleeve that I match towards the seam for the shoulder, and I've got single notch for the front, double notch for the back, and the rest just needs to ease in as I go. I'm going to sew from the inside of the sleeve now. So a centimetre seam allowance again. I'm starting at the seam, working my way round, and I'm just gently easing any fullness in as I go. If you've put in your gather stitch, then you can just stitch directly over that as you go round. I'm just easing as I go. There you are, that's my sleeve in. You can see it fits snugly. I'm going to just press that stitching quickly to set the stitches in, and then I'm going to overlock the raw edges. There we go. That's one sleeve in. Just have to repeat that now for the other side. I'll show you what it looks like. It should be all nice with no puckers. So next it's the facing. Got several bits to your facing here. This is the front sort of lapel bit, and this is the bottom front. So you should have a notch to match so that you know you're putting it on the right side. Right sides together. I've interfaced my facing so that it gives it a nice crisp finish. Pin those together, and it's a centimetre to stitch. There we go. So that's a pair of fronts. I'm going to open that and press it. There we are, two fronts pressed and seamed together. Now I'm going to do the back neck facing. Again, it's interfaced. I'm going to join them like that so it looks like a little hoop. Pop a pin in each side. That forms the shoulder seams. So stitch a centimetre. There we go, they're both stitched on. And I'm going to press them open again. Great, so we've got back neck, we've got fronts, and we've got the bottom front corners. This is the back. Now, there is a right side and a wrong side. I've put a little notch here so that I know that's the top. And I'm going to place that right sides together. Put a pin in there for the side seams at the hem, and on the other side, again it's a centimetre. We're nearly done with this facing. There are my seams. I'm going to press those open again. And that is all our facing pieces together. So it might look like a bit of spaghetti, but it's all together and ready. Once I've overlocked this edge, this is the outer edge, not the edge that's going to be stitched to your jacket, then that's ready to go on. There we are, nice and neat. Okay, so we're going to get this facing stitched to the jacket now. You can see I've pinned those top front bits, and I've got, there we go, shoulder seams together, and you want to basically go around pinning key points. I've also marked with a tiny little notch centre back of my facing and the centre back of my jacket on the neck, so I'm going to make sure they match, and then I'm just going to kind of put a few pins in as I go around. Obviously put more pins in or tack if that makes it easier for you. I tend to take my pins out as I go. That's it. There's side seams at the bottom there, make sure they match. The corners. So when you're happy that that's all in place, stitch a centimetre from the edge, and there's a couple of different ways you can tackle the corners. I don't particularly have a favourite, I tend to just do whatever I feel at the time, so I'm going to show you two ways that you can deal with them. The first way is to just come off, just keep going and come straight off. There's a little back tack to secure it, and then I just come off there and then start again, lining up the edge of the fabric with my foot again, and then off I go again. So that's one way to do a crisp corner. Another way is to pivot. So needle in, foot up, pivot your fabric, put your foot down, and off you go again. So whichever way you find easiest for you is the best way. Okay, we've been all the way around. A few pins still in, take those out. And I'm just going to really go around the whole thing, looking for any bulky seams to trim. And I'm going to clip into any curved edges. The straight edges don't matter so much, but the curves you really need to clip into, and the tighter the curve, the closer together you need to put your snips. I'm also going to cut across those corners as well, quite close to the stitching, but obviously being careful not to nick the stitching. You can always trim your facing down as well a little bit for those corners if you're finding your fabric's quite bulky. So next I'm going to press this seam allowance towards my facing. So I'll turn it over this way, make sure my seam allowance is towards my facing, press it and then stitch it very close to the edge. So I've given it a press, and now I'm just getting as far as I can into those corners. Don't worry if you can't get all the way in, but basically you need to ensure that that seam allowance is still pointing towards the facing and you're stitching fairly close to the edge. So you're stitching through several layers of fabric all in one. Back tack when you get as far as you can and come off, and go back on again when you get to those corners. They are a bit tricky. That's it, make sure everything's tucked under, and go all the way around your neck until you get back round and through your hem. There we go. Now you can see that then naturally wants to lie back quite nicely. I'll still press it again, but it will form a lovely crisp edge now. You can see how smart that is. I'm going to hand stitch these bits now, just so that the facing doesn't fall down. You can stitch in the ditch, as I call it, if you like, from the right side. I'm going to do that on the shoulders, so again you've got two options here. There's a little hand stitch way, which is literally just over and over just to secure it so it doesn't fall. Doesn't show on the outside, so just through the seam allowance. Do that on both side seams at the hem. And then, as I said, I'm going to show you how to stitch the facing in the ditch at the shoulders and the neck. So you can pick which is your preference. So I'll stitch right in that ditch there between the front and the back shoulders. There we go, line it up carefully. I've just stitched about 3 or 4 centimetres along it there, back tack. And that's how it looks, or it doesn't look. You can see it's pretty much in that seam. You can see it probably on the other side better. There you go. Prove I have stitched it. And I did the same on this side. And that will just secure it and stop it ruckling up when you put the jacket on and off. Next we're going to stitch the cuffs up. And you'll know how far to turn them up because it changes direction, doesn't it? It's got that little angle on it. So I'm just going to press up that amount, give it a little press, and then stitch on the overlocking all the way around from the inside. So here we go, I've given it a press. I'm starting underarm seam so that it doesn't show where I've come on and off. And from the inside, make sure your fabric's nice and flat as far ahead as you can go, and just take it a little bit at a time. There we are, that was super quick. I shall trim off those threads, and that's your cuff. As you can see, it's looking like a proper jacket now, as we're pretty much finished. Now for the popper. I've put a popper on mine. You could put a button and buttonhole. You don't have to have any fastening if you don't want to, but I've chosen a big popper. Here we go, and I'm just going to show you the way I do it. You can see there's 2 separate bits. One is thinner than the other. That one I'll call the outie, and the other one's the innie. So I put the outie on top, and I'm going to basically just stitch around. I'll do it super quickly because you don't want to watch me sewing a popper on. But basically I'm just stitching this through the facing, so it's not going to go through all the layers of the jacket, so you won't see it from the right side when you've got it done up. So I'm stitching that side on, and then at this point you need to try your jacket on, and then I've marked where the pointy bit of the outie comes to. So the centre part is in the centre of that cross. So when I've got my innie part, I'm going to put the centre of that in the centre of the cross. So I'm just putting that little bobbly bit over the cross, take those pins out, and I'll give it a quick stitch. This side's easy, it doesn't matter if it goes through all the layers because you won't see it. It'll be on the inside. There we go. So that's your popper. And that is one Mayfield jacket. It should, when you've finished, look a bit like this. Enjoy.